Welcome back, brothers and sisters. I'm Braden. This is Lanely Outdoors Academy, and thank you for stopping by. Alright guys, today is a crucial video. This is a big one because I think we're onto something. This is big. If you guys are going to share a video, if you're going to like a video, if you're going to repost a video, this is a really good one to do so because it rallies support behind our cause and gets information out there. I think we just stumbled upon why the left is putting $5 billion into infrastructure for gun violence prevention. It didn't make sense before. We touched on it on this channel, but now the left media is starting to come out with articles angling in that direction, and it's starting to paint a picture. And I want to know what you guys think because I think this is crucial. We get in front of it, we contact our representatives and our senators, and we get this part removed because this is bad. This is a long-term game. I'm starting to see it, and let me know if you guys are as well because this is getting nefarious. Okay, as always, everything is linked in the description box below, and let's dive in. Bear with me, watch the whole video, this is important. Okay. So, you guys remember that Biden came out in April and came out with $5 billion for gun violence prevention in the infrastructure bill, right? The infrastructure bill is Biden's key legislation. It's going to be run through the ringer, but we have to get this part out. $5 billion, however, was very interesting. If you recall, we talked about it on this channel, and we're like, is that going to be payoffs? Is that going to fill the coffers of their allies? Like, why $5 billion? That's a lot of money. Here's why. Check this out. They laid it out in USA News. Amid infrastructure talks, investment in community gun violence prevention is critical. As the White House focuses on improving Americans' traditional infrastructure, building out and investing in a system to prevent gun violence should be a priority. Now remember how the left uses the media. They use the media to float ideas to the politicians and also to rally the left base. They're trying to get unison behind this idea, and they're starting to lay out their plan, and this is big. Stay with me. This is the setup. President Joe Biden's recent unveiling of the American Jobs Plan aims to strengthen U.S. infrastructure for generations to come and at the same time boost the economy by creating jobs. Okay, that's just your standard fare, right? But here's where they start to make a case, and this is where it gets interesting because you start to pick up a trend, and this is going to go full circle. But gun violence kills more people each year than crumbling bridges or derailed trains and comes with staggering human and economic costs. Interesting, they care about economic costs now. About 40,000 people are killed by firearms each year. That in total, that includes suicides, homicides, and other firearms deaths. Interesting that they didn't put the actual stats in there because 26,000 deaths last year were caused by suicides. Not a mixture of all of it, majority suicides. 14,000 people were killed with guns in a population of 350 million people. To put that in perspective. Okay, so the indirect costs of gun violence are also profound. Gun violence can inhibit economic growth and depress home values in a way that exacerbate racial inequality. Well, there's that part. This means that there are fewer tax revenues to support services that communities provide to residents, such as repair or maintenance of physical infrastructure. Otherwise known as crime areas don't have capital investment because they're crime areas. It's amazing how economics matters all of a sudden when you're talking about gun violence. Even though the gun violence is primarily in crime-ridden areas that has to do with gang violence and or drugs. But other than that, don't worry about that. Also, I really like how they had to break it down in definition. A little insulting, but no big deal. Because we're cruising forward. And now comes the turn, people. Get ready. What America urgently needs is community violence prevention infrastructure. A system of physical, social, political, and financial connections among community violence preventionists that can support, develop, and sustain on-the-ground efforts to reduce gun violence. As with all public goods, such a system will require public investment and long-term commitments from government at all levels as well as community institutions. That is key. Did you catch that? As with all public goods, they're not talking about violence prevention. They are talking about creating a new public good. If you talk about a new public good, you now have something that controls the entire populace, similar to health. Think I'm crazy? Check it out. Read the next ones, because here is where they're going. Yes, Biden addressed the pandemic of gun violence and proposed $5 billion investment in community violence prevention. This signals an important turning point for treating public safety as a public good. They're turning public safety into something that can be regulated as a common everyday good, not a right. Very important. Here we go. Let's get turning. Of course, Investing in infrastructure is costly. It requires the labor and materials to build and sustain it. Investing in community violence infrastructure means building and training a new community-centered workforce, essentially a new form of public health worker or public safety professional. Do you see the trend that they're going? First, they set out the example of what was happening. They set the problem. Then they started to say, like, but it causes all these issues. And now they're starting to transition the conversation into, well, it's not gun violence. Well, now we need a solution that's public health and public works related. Essentially a new form of public health worker or public safety professional. That sounds like something that can be federally regulated if there's a problem, doesn't it? Long-term goal. They always have a reason. Now, this is the kicker. Public safety needs to be a core part of the nation's infrastructure, just like public health. Just as roads are needed to evacuate from a wildfire and levees are needed to hold back the flood, America needs a violence prevention infrastructure to provide safe passage during outbreaks of gun violence. Outbreaks of gun violence? I thought this was a continuous problem and we were a blight on the national stage, a national embarrassment, I believe Mr. Biden said. Isn't that interesting? How all of a sudden now we need to have the infrastructure in place in case there's a problem and an outbreak of gun violence. Well, for the past 6 months, it's been a national embarrassment and an epidemic, not an outbreak. You see what they're doing? They're parsing their words. And this is nefarious stuff, okay? A robust, sustainable violence prevention infrastructure that can save lives must be considered an essential in the rebuilding of this country. Rebuilding? Why do we need to rebuild it? That's interesting. Is there a teardown I don't know about? Did something happen? Because what they're doing right there in that last little phrase is infrastructure bills traditionally go to, I don't know, probably crazy and traditional infrastructure, not new public works and public health situations and public work professionals and systems that are regulated by the federal government having to do with specifically a violence problem, which happens to coincide with a Second Amendment right, but you can't regulate it through the legislation and you can't really do what you want to do. But it gets very different when you go public health and public works, isn't it? Isn't that interesting? This is what they're doing, guys. This is why it's so important that we stay on this. Because one thing that they're going to put in here, and they're going to start to transition this, and we're going to cover it on this channel, but you're going to see a lot more articles going towards public works and public infrastructure, public health infrastructure, gun violence to public work. All of these things, you're going to start to see it slide into the investment because it was $5 billion that Biden proposed, and there was no reason. Now we're starting to see reasons. $5 billion. Does that sound like this was pre-planned and everyone knows what's going on? It is because they do. But luckily, you and I are on this. We are the tip of the spear. We are the cutting edge. And we are going to make sure we contact our representatives and our senators to make sure this stuff does not become a public work that they can regulate publicly. Right? We are on this, guys, and your voice matters more than you know, and we are going to do amazing work in 2022, but right now the battle at hand is this infrastructure bill, because they are going to slide some stuff in here that is not an infrastructure, and we got to be on it. But you know I'll be here. Let me know what you think in the comments field below, and until tomorrow, I'm Braden. See you later.